The 2024 track and field season has to be one of the greatest that we've seen in recent memory. And of course, a large part of that has to be the fact that this was an Olympic year. But that ain't all of it. Before the Olympic trials were even over, Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone had broken her own world record again in the 400 hurdles. And we got to watch an epic battle in the men's 200 meter dash, where the same three American men who made Team USA during the last Olympics did it again in 2024. And once they got over to the games, they finished in the exact same order, going second, third, and fourth, even though that's not what they wanted. And I bring up that race specifically because Erriyon Knighton was on the starting line. And there was a time during this season where we weren't sure if we were ever going to see him race, and it wasn't due to injury or him forgetting how to run fast. The reason why he disappeared from the track for a while is because he was under review for a cheating violation. He was essentially suspended until further review later cleared him. And as a result, the first real races that he got to compete in were at the Olympic trials. I'm going to be 100% real with you. This is a topic that I hardly ever talk about at all. In fact, it's a topic that I try to avoid for the most part, because although track and field is one of the oldest sports that we have now, it has still struggled to build a name for itself in the court of public opinion. And I don't want to be the guy that drags the sport down even further. But when I go through the comment section on many of my videos, it has become abundantly clear to me that this topic is clearly on the minds of most of you. So for that reason, I am going to address it, because track and field does have a bit of a cheating problem. I am not saying that all the athletes out there are actually cheating. And when I say that word, you know exactly what I'm trying to say. But what I am suggesting is that the idea that most of the athletes are doing something wrong, that is a cloud that hangs over the sport. And as much as I might want to ignore it, when I see stories like what happened to Issam Asinga, where he has been suspended for 4 years, a man who was stepping onto a college campus, was on scholarship to compete at the NCAA level, listed on the roster, and I don't think we're ever going to see him run for them. I can definitely see how that starts to call into question everybody who goes out there and starts running fast. Because Issam Asinga was not just another high school sprinter. He was the world junior record holder and one of the fastest men in the world while he was competing. He even beat Noah Lyles in 2023, the same season where Noah later went on to win the world championship in the 100 meter dash. Yes, Asinga beat him in a foot race through 100 meters. So I apologize in advance because this video is a little bit different, because I actually care about the sport at every single level. And the fact that this cloud has been hanging over it for my entire lifetime and beyond is something that we clearly have to get past if we want Michael Johnson's Grand Slam track league to ever be taken legitimately, at least in the eyes of a casual fan. And I am also aware that something I might say is likely going to upset some people, and I'm willing to accept the consequences. But I need to be very clear about this, that I have no intentions of attacking any individual athlete through this video. If I reference somebody by name who was suspended, the only reason I'm doing it is because that information is on the books, and I'm going to try to avoid name dropping as much as possible. But the only way to have this conversation is we actually have to have the conversation. So let's get into it. The state of track and field when it regards to cheating, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And to clarify, I am going to focus almost entirely on the sprinters, specifically on the men's side, because we would be here all day if we tried to talk about everybody else. We know that some things are actually happening, but it is not fair that the entire sport have to carry the weight of a few bad decisions by a few athletes. And I know I'm not the only one who is tired of living in a world where every time an athlete actually does run fast, people always start to wonder now whether or not it's legit. So allow me to go over the facts the way that I understand them, because the only way to know what's going on in track and field, specifically in regards to cheating at this moment in the game, you have to know what already happened historically. And on the men's side, I'm going to choose to start this story all the way back in 1984. And there's a reason. Because Ben Johnson was competing in the Olympics in the 100 meter dash back then. He didn't win. He got the bronze medal. Most of you already know where this story is headed, because by 1987, Ben Johnson had run way faster than that. He went 9.83 seconds in the 100 meter dash. And then in 1988, he went 9.79 seconds. Shortly thereafter, we found out, the world found out, that that he was disqualified because, well, he was cheating along the way. Keep in mind that all the way back then, he ran 9.79 seconds. That is a time that sounded too good to be true because it was too good to be true. I am not here to speculate about what every other sprinter was doing at that time in history. I have no idea, but what I am gonna say is that for the next decade, the world definitely waited to watch anybody run 9.7 anything, and nobody could pull it off. And while everybody kept trying, some people started getting suspended. I told you I wasn't gonna name drop everybody. By the time we got to the Sydney 2000 Olympics, Maurice Greene was now the king of the 100-meter dash, and Marion Jones was clearly the queen of the women's sprints. I told you I was gonna focus on the men, but I have to bring this up because the Marion Jones situation hits me hard, because that was the first Olympics that I really paid attention to as a kid. We watched her run away from everyone in the world, celebrated it, and then years later we found out that she was cheating. The medals were stripped, and they took her off of the record books. But we know what we saw. And as far as Maurice Greene is concerned, he's still very relevant to this story, because no, he wasn't technically suspended at any point in his career, but he does have allegations on the books. I'm not saying that he did anything. I really don't want to believe that at all. What I am saying is it's a very bad look for the sport for those types of allegations to get steam. So whether or not he actually did anything he wasn't supposed to, the fact that he was out in front and did record 9.7 anything, he went 9.79, that was enough for many people to question the integrity. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. And I'm Coach Rob, the founder of SCArecruiting.com, where I rank the best track and field recruits across the entire nation. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section, because I try to read them all. And between that moment and the 2008 Olympics, a whole bunch of fast sprinters came and went. And when they did, almost all of them had their times taken off of the record books when they left. Names like Tim Montgomery and Calvin Harrison are just a few, but remember, I have no intention of name dropping everybody. What really matters is that some of the really fast men who did compete during that era eventually at some point did have a suspension. So even if they do have times that remain on the record books, at any moment, having your name tangled up in a suspension for cheating does kind of call into question everything that you did. And of course, the year 2008 is when Usain Bolt himself came along. I'm gonna get out in front of this point and say it right now. Usain Bolt was never suspended for cheating at any point in his career. But in 2008, he went 9.69 seconds. And then in 2009, he went 9.58 seconds. Remember, we basically had to wait for decades to get anybody who could run 9.7 anything and not get suspended. In fact, not one sprinter in world history has run faster than 9.76 seconds who wasn't named Usain Bolt without getting suspended. I am not making this up. When the numbers tell me something like that, it does start to convince me that perhaps the human body actually has a limit. For everybody else in the world, it might be 9.76. And apparently, Usain Bolt pushed it, maybe all the way to the limit. As a fan of the sport, it really pains me to admit that men like Tyson Gay and Justin Gatlin, who I personally loved watching competing, still got caught up in all this mess. The Usain Bolt era effectively ended in 2017. I would argue it really ended in 2016, because what we saw in 2017 really wasn't Bolt on the track anymore. So from that moment up until now, every single man in sprinting is effectively chasing a ghost. A ghost that ran 9.58 seconds. And historically speaking, if anybody runs 9.7 anything, we start to get suspicious. Because historically speaking, those have been the people who've been getting suspended. I definitely refuse to believe that everyone in the game right now is cheating. But that does bring up a brand new layer to this whole thing, which is why would people cheat in the first place? And that's very interesting. It is pretty illogical that athletes will simply cheat just so they can win. So we cannot assume that just because somebody is in the front of the race that they're likely doing something they shouldn't be. In a criminal courtroom, you cannot just convict people based on circumstantial evidence alone. and you also have to establish motive. I believe the most logical motive for somebody to cheat is because they've been losing, and that losing is costing them money specifically. In other words, you would likely be cheating because your plan is to try to get in the front, and there's some type of financial payout once you do. Ronnie Coleman is not a track athlete, but he does admit to taking performance enhancers to help him as a bodybuilder. The reason why he said he did it is because other competitors got in his head, and he felt the only way for him to compete was he had to do what he thought everyone else was doing. So I'm going to take that logic and simply flip it the other direction. Any athlete who has always been in the front of the race at their age level on the way up to being a pro likely doesn't have a good reason to start cheating just so they can stay where they already are. Usain Bolt specifically was practically the fastest at every level he competed at. At the junior level, when you break world records, it is logical that you might do it when you get to the senior level. And once he got himself out in front in the one race that everybody pays attention to, at the Olympics, the only thing he had to do was keep being himself. To clarify, Usain Bolt's dominance lasted from 2008 to 2016 legitimately, but he never really ran faster than anything he was doing in 2009. He continued to get slower, but it didn't matter because he was so far ahead of everybody else that he was still going to win. And Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone is perhaps the closest thing we've seen to him on the women's side in this era, and her resume looks almost exactly the same. She was always faster than everybody else at whatever level she was competing at. She has the high school national records, NCAA records, and world records that she's broken a whole bunch of times to prove it. Even an athlete like Noah Lyles was always the fastest at whatever level he was competing at. He was the fastest world junior in the 100-meter dash. So it makes sense that one day he might be the fastest in the world in that same event. I admit that cheating is a problem, and it's obviously happening somewhere. But I also believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. So it is simply not fair for people to challenge every single stellar performance and assume that they might be doing something they shouldn't. But I also can't pretend to address this question if I don't speak about the biggest elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about. It's the way we do testing in the first place. The current system for professional track and field athletes is actually pretty aggressive. For the most part, if you go out there and perform at an incredibly elite level, you are going to get tested. And once the governing bodies see you that way, you can almost be tested anytime they want. For that reason, it's incredibly easy for an athlete to get whereabout violations, and many fans have no idea what that even is. So allow me to try to break it down a little bit. Professional track and field athletes travel a whole lot. It's just kind of how the job goes. And whereabout violations happen when an athlete is not wherever they are supposed to be when their time for testing actually shows up. The quick version of explaining it is that for pro athletes to not get a whereabout violation, they almost have to give a step-by-step of wherever they're going to be at any given moment so that if they get selected for testing, they can be in place. You can't go on vacation, you can't visit your family out of town, you basically can't go anywhere without at least letting them know where you're going, but you're really kind of asking for permission. Almost no professional sport has a system that ridiculous, which is why athletes do get whereabout violations. Not necessarily because they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. My friend Anderson Emerald of the channel The Final Leg pointed out that the athletes themselves have spoken about this issue. They've made it very clear that it's really easy to get a whereabout violation. Of course, it's a very bad look if you do get suspended as a result of that. And yes, that suspension does go on the books, and we gotta look at you differently. I am just saying that the system that promoted those suspensions itself needs to be addressed. This dark cloud has definitely hung over the sport for far too long, and I don't know exactly what we need to do in order to remove it, but I do believe that the sport right now is cleaner than it has ever been. Just consider that sprinters at every level, the high school level and the college level, are faster than they've ever been running. But the only men who aren't faster are officially now the pros. The last time a short sprinting world record was broken, on either the men's or the women's side, was still the year 2009. That is 15 years ago. And as far as the men's 100 is concerned, nobody has ever even broken 9.76 seconds since Bolt retired. But if you saw what the men were doing at this Olympics, we have way more fast men who are able to break 10 seconds than we've ever had in history. That is not an opinion, it is a fact. The only reason why some fans can't appreciate it is because they're not quite as fast as some of the times that we were used to seeing. The same names that either A, got suspended and came back, or got taken off the books entirely. As far as I'm concerned, we are now entering the golden age of sprinting, where we are getting to watch the world's fastest humans compete fairly. I know that you want to see fast times, and trust me, I want to see them too. But if the athletes whom we're watching aren't planning on doing anything unusual with their training, then I guess running 9.79 seconds to win the Olympic final is just something that we're all gonna have to get used to, because things ain't changing anytime soon. In the sport of track and field, confidence is everything, because when you win, that is just the moment when everybody else finds out what you already knew to be true, that fast is a lifestyle. Get your Fast is a Lifestyle track and field gear at scarecruiting.com/shop, or use the link in the description below. It's a huge support to me and this channel, so I can continue to make you more content like this. And remember, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.